Girl mocks fallen soldier memorial. A group of teenagers strolled through the park on a mild, sunny afternoon. The vibrant greens of the trees and the distant hum of children playing provided the perfect backdrop for an afternoon of laughter and idle chatter. Among them was Olivia, a girl known for her sharp wit and sarcastic humor, always the first to crack a joke, even at the most inappropriate times. Her friends loved her for it. They admired her confidence and her ability to say things they never dared. She led the group through the winding paths, talking loudly about the latest gossip from school when something caught her eye ahead. Standing in the center of a well-maintained grassy area was a soldier's memorial. The statue was tall and solemn, a representation of a soldier in full gear, standing upright with a rifle by his side, gaze cast into the distance as though forever on guard. A plaque at the base of the statue read, "In honor of those who gave their lives for freedom." The figure seemed almost out of place amidst the bustling park where children ran and couples strolled hand in hand. It was a stark reminder of something more serious, something heavier than the light-heartedness of the day. Olivia's lips curled into a smirk as she approached it, her mind already churning with the possibilities of a joke. She had always felt a bit cynical about these kinds of things. Statues, memorials, all the stuff adults took so seriously. To her, they were relics of a past that didn't concern her, pieces of history that felt distant and irrelevant in her world of social media, parties, and teenage drama. She didn't think much about the wars that had happened or the people who had fought them. They were just names in textbooks or topics in movies. "What a waste," Olivia said loudly, making sure her friends could hear her. She nodded toward the statue, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Seriously, what's the point? It's just a hunk of metal. Nobody even cares anymore." She kicked a small rock toward the base of the statue, as if to punctuate her disdain. Her friends laughed nervously, some of them glancing around to see if anyone else had noticed. It wasn't the first time Olivia had mocked something like this, and though they often felt uneasy about it, they never said anything. They just went along with it because Olivia was their leader, the one who dictated the tone of their little group. Sophie, one of Olivia's closest friends, bit her lip. She had always been more sensitive than the others, but even she found it hard to speak up when Olivia got like this. It wasn't that Sophie didn't understand the appeal of mocking things. It gave them a sense of power, a way to show the world that they didn't take things too seriously. But something about mocking the statue felt wrong. Sophie glanced at the plaque and read the inscription. The words, "gave their lives for freedom," lingered in her mind. But she stayed quiet, unsure of how to voice the discomfort swirling in her chest. As Olivia continued to laugh, her voice carrying through the quiet of the park, an elderly woman approached slowly from a nearby bench. She had been sitting there, watching the entire scene unfold from a distance. Her figure was small and frail, her thin frame barely supported by the cane she leaned on. Dressed in a simple grey cardigan and long skirt, she looked like she belonged to another era, a time long before these teenagers had been born. Her face, though wrinkled with age, held a certain dignity, and her eyes were sharp, focused, despite the years that had passed since her youth. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she walked closer, her steps slow but steady, her gaze never leaving Olivia. The teenagers were too wrapped up in their conversation to notice her at first, until she came to a stop just a few feet behind them. "That man," the elderly woman said, her voice soft yet firm, cutting through the chatter like a knife. "That man gave his life so people like you could stand here today." The group froze. Olivia's smirk faltered, and she turned around slowly, her heart skipping a beat. The rest of the group followed her gaze, their eyes widening when they saw the elderly woman standing there, watching them with an expression that was equal parts sadness and strength. There was no anger in her voice, no accusation, no raised tone, but something about the way she spoke hit Olivia harder than she expected. The elderly woman's hand trembled slightly as she lifted it, pointing toward the statue. "That man is my husband," she said, her voice trembling only slightly. "He died many years ago in a war you probably don't remember. But I remember. I remember every day." Olivia swallowed hard, her throat tightening as the woman's words sunk in. The mocking grin that had played on her lips moments before was gone now, replaced by a growing sense of unease. She hadn't considered that the statue could represent something so personal, so real. To her, it had just been a piece of metal, like all the other statues scattered around parks and squares. But hearing this woman's voice, the pain woven into each word, made her feel small, insignificant in a way she had never felt before. The other teenagers stood in awkward silence, some glancing down at the ground, others shifting uncomfortably as the weight of the situation settled over them. Olivia opened her mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. For the first time in a long time, she found herself completely speechless. The woman stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the statue. She moved slowly, each step deliberate, as though it took all her strength just to stand. When she reached the base of the memorial, she knelt down, placing a small bouquet of flowers at the foot of the statue. Her hands trembled as she brushed away the dirt Olivia had kicked up moments earlier. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the woman's frail hands smoothing the ground, the flowers resting against the stone in a silent tribute. Guilt clawed at her insides, twisting and turning until she couldn't bear it anymore. She wanted to apologize, to say something that would make it better. But how could she? How could she make up for such carelessness, such thoughtlessness? The elderly woman stood up slowly, using the cane to steady herself, and turned to face the group again. Her eyes were filled with unshed tears, but she held herself with grace, her voice still calm, still composed. "I come here every week," she said quietly, "to honor him, to remind myself that his sacrifice wasn't in vain." She paused, looking directly at Olivia, her gaze soft but piercing. "I know you didn't mean to be cruel, but please understand, this is more than just a statue. It's more than just metal and stone. It's a memory, it's a life, and it deserves respect." A thick silence followed her words, heavy with emotion. Olivia's stomach churned with shame, the weight of her actions pressing down on her until it felt like she could barely breathe. She glanced at her friends, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but they were all looking away, their faces pale, their expressions somber. Without another word, the elderly woman turned and began to walk away, her steps slow and steady as she disappeared down the path. The group stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The playful energy that had filled their afternoon completely evaporated. Olivia felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back, unwilling to let them fall. Sophie, who had remained silent throughout the encounter, finally spoke, her voice soft and uncertain. "Maybe we should go." But Olivia didn't move. She couldn't. Her feet felt rooted to the ground, her mind replaying the woman's words over and over again. That man gave his life. It echoed in her head like a drumbeat, each repetition filling her with more guilt, more shame. How could she have been so thoughtless, so careless, Her eyes fell back to the statue, the once mockingly stiff figure of the soldier now seeming to take on a different meaning entirely. She knelt down, her hands trembling as she reached out to brush the last bits of dirt away from the plaque. Her fingers traced the engraved words, "In honor of those who gave their lives for freedom." She had read them before, but they hadn't meant anything to her then. Now they felt like a reprimand, a reminder of the depth of her ignorance. Her friends watched her in silence, their discomfort clear, but none of them said anything. None of them knew what to say. They had all been complicit, laughing at Olivia's joke, going along with her mockery. But now, as they stood in the shadow of the memorial, they felt the sting of their actions as keenly as she did. As Olivia stood up, she turned to face them, her voice unsteady. I didn't know," she said quietly, her usual confidence gone, replaced by uncertainty. Sophie stepped forward, placing a hand on Olivia's arm, her expression soft. "It's okay. I don't think any of us really understood." But Olivia shook her head, her gaze drifting back to the memorial. "It's not okay," she whispered. "We were wrong." The group fell silent again, the gravity of what had happened sinking in. Slowly, they began to walk away, their footsteps quiet, their heads lowered. The park, which had felt so full of life and energy earlier, now seemed somber, the laughter of children and the distant chatter of other visitors muted in the aftermath of their encounter. As they reached the edge of the park, Olivia stopped, turning to glance back at the memorial one last time. The statue stood tall and unyielding, a silent guardian over the memories of those who had given everything. For the first time, she saw it for what it really was. Not just a piece of metal, not just a decoration in a park, but a tribute to lives lived and lost, to sacrifices made so that she and her friends could live in a world where they were free to laugh, free to joke, free to walk through the park without fear. She wiped a tear from her cheek, swallowing the lump in her throat. The elderly woman's words lingered in her mind, a reminder of the cost of the freedoms she had taken for granted. From that day on, Olivia never looked at memorials the same way again. Each one, she realized, held a story, a history of love, loss, and sacrifice. And behind every statue is someone like that elderly woman, someone still grieving, still remembering, still honoring the lives that had been given so that others could live theirs.